so your employees can get back to work on the things you hired them to do, like putting your company on top.
Improve your productivity with a Ricoh copier from Metro Sales. Call 861-4000.
You saw them at the auto show, the new 92 Pontiac Grand Ams. Since then, your Pontiac excitement dealers have been selling them in record numbers. The reasons? Grand Am driving excitement. Standard safety features like anti-lock brakes and Grand Am value. Now get option package savings and cash back totaling $1,425. Plus, qualified first-time new car buyers financing with GMAC can get an additional $400 cash back. See your Pontiac excitement dealers.
Dress down for leukemia. Call 545-3309.
More on Sunday is sponsored by NSP, the energy to make things better.
Morning. In American television, stars in their 60s are washed up, right? Not in Japan, they aren't. In Tokyo, twin sisters, 99 years old, starring in Japanese commercials, selling everything from cakes and bread to walkers. They have become big-time celebrities in Japan. They're recognized everywhere, giving not only autographs, but handprints. We learn more about them now from reporter Yoshi Oko.
100歳の記念にと親戚に配った合わせて200歳の手形。
こんなよかった。こんなよかった。ちょっと落ち着かないんだ。
That's right. Not only do they sell products, but they tell a pretty good joke, too.
とうとう100になってね。よかったね。幸せ。
I kind of like that one myself. Just goes to prove that humor is universal. Okay, ladies, thank you. Each year at this time we enjoy, or suffer, the greatest commingling or overlap of the seasons: basketball, football, hockey, baseball, and road construction. The Highway Department came through this week to announce $19 billion worth of summer construction. 48 projects in all, locking most of us in or out of the Twin Cities, including Highway 280 from Como to University in St. Paul, the I-94 interchange at Maple Grove to Highway 55, I-94 at Mons Boulevard to White Bear Avenue, 35W at the Minnesota River to 76th Street, not to mention work on the Lake Street Marshall Avenue Bridge and the Lafayette Bridge over I-94. There you are, folks. Anyone living outside these boundaries is locked out of the cities until the first frost. We must admire my old high school buddy, Bill Crawford, who's been with the Highway Department for 65 years, for his candor.
Well, as long as you and I keep buying cars and driving them, and more of us do it every year, we're never going to see the end of this. This is not something that we're going to get completed this year, and we're going to have a gravy train for the next 10 years.
One encouraging note, all work on 394 from Minneapolis to Wayzata, which was started shortly after the Spanish-American War, is now completed. Andy McPhail, baseball's wunderkind, enlivened our enjoyment of the pre-baseball season when he extended his rent-a-pitcher philosophy to include Pittsburgh's 20-game winning John Smiley, proving again that today's baseball strategy has been moved from the ball diamond to the accountant's office. Smiley will be a free agent at the end of the season, and the Pirates chose to unload him because they have two other millionaires on their roster. The Twins gave up Denny Nagel, a fine pitching prospect, and an outfielder I've never heard of. Viking fans ought to have been cheered with the announcement this week that Roger Craig, the Los Angeles Raiders running back, agreed to a 2-year contract worth 800,000 simoleons a year, rejoining the Vikings coach Dennis Green. Craig had been one of the NFL's most productive running backs when Green was coaching the 49ers. Last year, he carried the ball 162 times, good for 590 yards. The Gopher basketball team ended its season on a dreary but not altogether hopeless note, losing to Washington State 72-70 in the opening game of the National Invitation. Now, somewhere in this mess, with 5 minutes remaining in the first half, the referees ruled that Vashawn Leonard had fouled. which brought a raging Clem Haskins onto the floor, for which he was assessed 2 technicals and thrown out of the game. But in the second half, the worst shooting team in the Big Ten, Minnesota, shot 69%, 55% for the entire game. That's fantastic. Wait till next year. As we approach the horse racing season in Minnesota, Canterbury Downs financial prospects took another beating when a Ramsey district judge ruled that betting on races by telephone and in off-track lounges is unconstitutional because he said that when voters authorized pari-mutuel betting in 1982, they did so with the understanding that the wagering would be confined to the racetrack. This past week was rife with news of hate crimes. Began last Sunday with a cross burning in St. Paul, outside a house shared by several black students at the University of St. Thomas. The culprit also smashed the storm door and left a note warning, quote, "Niggers, watch your back." The Gay and Lesbian Community Action Council announced an alarming jump in anti-homosexual incidents in our state. Physical assault up 132%, verbal harassment up 273%, hate mail up 220%. Some of the increases are attributed to a greater willingness to report such incidents. And at Harding High School in St. Paul this past week, an art teacher drew a large mouth, a cotton field, and watermelon onto a student's portrait of a black classmate. Needless to say, the picture is drawing fire, but some say that the teacher is not being adequately punished. This is 1992? The size of the AIDS memorial quilt on display at the Metrodome this week was 10 times the size of what it was when it was here 5 years ago. The 2,200 panels eulogizing a victim of AIDS includes 640 Minnesotans. Here's Amy Marsalis.
As large as it looms, this is just a portion of the enormous and ever-growing AIDS memorial quilt that filled the floor of the Metrodome earlier this week. There were many hugs and tears shared as visitors read the names of people who have fallen to AIDS. But many of the fallen didn't do so without a fight.
He was, as my wife has pointed out, he was a patriot, always a patriot, but he was a soldier to the very end. He picked a home hospice so he could go in an honorable and quick way, and we believe that if there was a patriot that deserved to be memorialized by a flag, it was our son.
The Seversons, like so many other families, felt they could express the life of their child through a quilted panel. The AIDS quilt has other new names after this stop in Minneapolis, a well-known name like former Minneapolis City Councilman Brian Coyle, and a lesser-known but very much loved 3-year-old Sadie. The stories of the lives cut short by AIDS are told over and over, panel by panel. The only hope is that the quilt, now more than 14,000 panels, will stop growing soon. For more on Sunday, I'm Amy Marsalis.
High drama this week in Ramsey District Court, where Rebecca Rand, who calls herself a madam, was ruled to be a pimp. Outside the court, she's confronted by a former hooker now fighting prostitution.
You exploit women. We don't wear the Rebecca, you're a pimp, and the reason that the media doesn't recognize it is because of their racist, stereotypic imagery of what pimps are.
Pimp for Madam, Rebecca Rand is guilty on 3 prostitution-type offenses, will give up her 2 saunas, pay 200,000 clams in court costs, and will probably go to prison. But there'll be someone else to take her place. On Monday, Rod Grams, the former KMSP Channel 9 newscaster, was standing on the other side of the podium at a news conference to become one of the first to announce his Republican candidacy against the recently stigmatized 6th District Democratic Congressman Jerry Sikorsky. And where would we be without the McKnight Foundations? For years, it has rescued social service and arts programs in Minnesota. Last week, it announced a 5-year, $45 million program to promote and clean up the environment of the Mississippi, which citizens and the industries of the 33 states which are touched by the river have been treating as a trash dispensary. The grant will attack hundreds of the river's health problems by establishing environmental projects along its 2,400 miles. We are pleased to announce that our News of the Week award goes to M. David Haviland of Biwabik for the most comprehensive documentary video entitled An Early History of Aviation in the United States. Which serves as a reminder that next week the long, tiresome deal with Northwest Airlines will finally be wrapped up. In a moment, a report with Alan Cox identifying the concessions and the compromises.
At Abra Auto Body, we care about our customers and hold their trust with the greatest regard. That's why we'll guarantee all body and structural repairs with a lifetime guarantee. Why? Because making you happy is good business. Abra Auto Body, 14 locations.
An important part of NSP's job is maintaining our power lines. But by dramatically reducing pollution over the past 20 years, and by supporting tougher federal clean air standards, NSP is also helping to maintain these lines.
1, 2, 3, 4. Let's roll. Bowling, bowling in the USA. America's first great sport. Bowling, rolling through the USA.
Have fun with family and friends. Go bowling. You'll find open lanes available day or night, 7 days a week. Stop in or call your favorite metro area Gold Pen Bowling Center.
Rock and rollin', out of control. Bowling, bowling in the U.S.
Finally, the Northwest Airlines deal with the state of Minnesota is about to be consummated. Reporter Alan Cox has been covering the airline for a decade, well, before this tempest in a terminal, as he calls it, ever came up, and has often found Northwest, well, less than forthcoming. 8 years ago, the old Northwest wouldn't allow Alan near its brand new weather department when we asked to do a profile. But as with so much else about Northwest, that too has apparently changed.
So this is Northwest's meteorology department. It's part of a 9-month-old operations center, pulling together people who'd been spread out across the Twin Cities. Management decided to make money, they had to spend money. The center cost $6 million to build. It should save $9 million its first year.
I think this environment, which is bright and conducive to teamwork and to employees working well together, is very much like the morale and the confidence we're building right here inside the airline and for our customers.
You're saying you're here to stay?
Yes, of course.
Well, maybe that's a strange question to ask about such a bustling company, but Northwest's health, its prospects, were the subject of a debate that consumed Minnesota government for much of last year. And after the Airports Commission votes the day after tomorrow, every Minnesota taxpayer will have a new stake in how Northwest does.
In the last 3 months, it's been an exceptionally demanding time period as we try to finalize documents and draw the various elements of this transaction together to, in fact, ensure that we do have a doable transaction and one that we believe properly protects the public.
That's what all the parties said they wanted, to protect the public. Even late last week, the meetings were still going on. Iron Range officials come to St. Paul to work out final details, a chapter in a long story. John Gunyu tried to direct the story from the state side. He won, but you can still hear his frustration.
One of our frustrations on this was that a lot of the criticism, in fact, most of the criticism took place before we announced what the deal was. And it was frustrating to me because while you're negotiating something like this, you can't talk about it. You know, we had a lot of people saying, well, if they can't get this, they should get this. If they don't get this, this is terrible. They need this. It's very easy to say that from the outside. Because there are a lot of trade-offs when you get into that. Obviously, for one thing, to get the headquarters guarantee, you give up some financial things.
Here's what the government deal makers got from the airline in last week's horse trading. Promises for no increase in the use of noisy jets at Twin Cities International. Promises to maintain employment levels where they are now in Minnesota. To add 500 jobs at the bases on the range by 1995, 1,500 jobs in 1998. To keep the headquarters here and at least 3/4 of the flights into the Twin Cities, Northwest has now.
Whatever guarantees are there would probably not survive either a bankruptcy court or could be bought out as part of a moving deal. I don't think that they're as ironclad as the proponents of the deal say that they are. But I would say that I would think that Northwest intends to stay there now.
Phyllis Kahn voted no on the Northwest deal when the legislature decided it last December. Now she says she gets a steady stream of letters from companies that say if Northwest deserves help, so do they. That philosophical debate, should government help one corporation, transcended all the talk about revenue projections and passenger miles. It heated the debate, led the airline to mount a massive campaign to win aid. They didn't persuade John Himley.
They probably didn't win a lot of friends in the way that the whole thing was lobbied. They did gain approval of the package, but as to how Minnesotans now feel about it, how lawmakers feel about it, or MAC commissioners feel about it, you know, I think a lot of people are basically feeling a little bit bruised.
The airline says this started it, the ad comparing Northwest co-chairman Al Checkey with a predator. The man who placed it said it served a purpose.
I think what we did will probably keep other people from trying to do the same thing again. It's hard to believe that another corporation would go through the trauma that Northwest must have gone through to get this done. So we may have prevented some things that we'll never know about, other abuses of power.
Hendry says the deal could blow up someday, hurting bond buyers and Minnesota taxpayers. John Gunyu says no.
If it does fall, notice if we do have to make up any of those bonds, we have all these things ahead of us. We have the buildings themselves, we have the collateral themselves, we have any type of workout that would be done. I would stake my firstborn child's life on the fact that the state will never pay $175 million worth of bonds.
I hesitate to ask the question because I'm not sure we have time for the answer. What are the financial details? Can you elaborate any further?
Even if I could remember and recite all the details, we'd probably bump into 60 minutes if I tried to describe them all. And that complexity is one of the frustrations of people like Commissioner Gunyu who think the deal was a good one. We reporters always use the shorthand of $838 million, and he says that gave people the impression the state and local governments were just handing that over as a blank check to the airline. In fact, most of the money is made up of loan guarantees and of some tax credits for jobs to be created. But critics of the deal say that is also part of the problem, the complexity. Phyllis Kahn says, to be honest about it with the taxpayers and everyone else, if we thought it was a good idea to help the airline, we should have done it out of taxpayers' money and said, here's what it's costing you.
All those promises, as well as the financial promises, are they enforceable? And if they aren't, what are the penalties? What must be paid for violating them?
Well, the ones we ticked off there called the public policy covenants or promises about noise and job creation. There are specific provisions that if the airline falls short, the state and local governments can demand that they pay back the loan much more quickly. But the overall promise is, will Northwest be able to pay off the loan? Will they be strong enough? And given all the controversy, there is collateral. There's more than enough collateral, according to the people who've done the estimates. But if worse ever came to worst, and the state started putting its hands on that collateral, it would make it hard for Northwest to continue. And if you thought you saw a lot of airline employees at the Capitol lobbying for this package, imagine what it would be like if the state tried to get a hold of that money. It's a real question of how the political system would handle something of that sort.
You quoted Bruce Hendry as saying the whole thing could blow up. What did he have in mind?
Well, he's making a comparison to a situation that occurred in Washington State a few years back where some utilities got into trouble and it became a financial meltdown where bond payers didn't get their money back. The credit rating of the state of Washington, some of the areas out there, were a disaster for a few years. He says that could happen here basically because the state didn't have the authority to approve this deal. Commissioner Gunyu says the state clearly did have the authority, that's nothing to worry about. And Commissioner Gunyu criticizes Bruce Hendry, says, why is he criticizing public subsidies for business since one of his businesses has benefited from that?
We have the possibility of a conflict of interest here. The Metropolitan Airports Commission, which is a regulatory agency to Northwest Airlines, is now something of a partner with Northwest Airlines. How do they reconcile that?
Well, some of the critics say there is a conflict, that the Airports Commission is now going to want Northwest to succeed, even as it's supposed to treat Northwest as an equal with other airlines. But in fact, the Airports Commission says it's doing everything it can to help competitors of Northwest. On Friday, I did a story about how the Airports Commission is attempting to bring in new airlines, sometimes against the wishes of Northwest.
Very good, Alan. Thank you very much. I imagine you'd be anxious to get onto another story someday.
I thought it was ending months ago.
Thank you. In a moment, looking back on St. Patrick's Day and some contrasting views on the meaning of the day from two who were first-hand observers of both Twin Cities parades.
Andy Ladd and Melissa Gardner have been in love all their lives, or at least since second grade. But people grow up and grow apart, and through other worlds, other loves, and other lives, they'd always have each other and their love letters. See the play Time magazine calls one of the best of the decade, A.R. Gurney's romantic comedy Love Letters.
The Ordway presents Robert Wagner and Stephanie Powers in Love Letters, March 24th through the 29th at the Historic State Theater. Call Ticketmaster 612-989-5151. NBA Authentics. Look for the real stuff.
By investing $650 million in pollution control equipment and burning low-sulfur coal in our power plants, NSP is playing a major role in guarding two of our most precious natural resources, clean air and clean water.
I ever have a festive day last Tuesday? Well, nothing big, really. I just happened to have been the Grand Marshal for both the Minneapolis and St. Paul St. Patrick's Day parades is all. Without contradiction, you could say the difference between the two parades was the difference between night and day, for precisely that reason, and somewhat for another reason. In St. Paul, Mayor Scheibel, under a warming sun, led the official contingent. I shared the lead car with Mickey Mouse, for heaven's sake. Maybe it was the glare of daylight that reinforced our imagery of the stereotyped Irish that made the green hair greener than it was, and the costumes more vibrant than they would otherwise be, and the little children sweeter than we see them at home. But the emphasis on the St. Paul parade has always been on the people marching. There seemed a greater mix of them. And when you get a mix of Irish, you get a brassier, more blaring, blarney-filled parade. A sunny day is most always a great source of cheer, and in this case, provided the contrast to Minneapolis's night parade, which, while also cheery, was made less raucous by the permeating cold of evening. There were still the tricksters showing their skills, and Lord knows pretty girls were very conspicuous. No city has exclusive domain there, nor on those who have a particular affection for the camera. And here, too, there were family clans marching proudly along. Far fewer spectators, we must say, in Minneapolis and St. Paul. It may have been the cold and the night, but spectator participation seemed more restrained, more contained, maybe out of respect for the historical significance of the day.
Yes, and that's the way it should be. Now, what's that supposed to mean? In Ireland, St. Patrick's is a day of reflection. Its heritage is a solemn one. It's almost religious. It's saintly, get it? So why solemn? If St. Paddy drove... St. Patrick, please, not St. Paddy. If St. Patrick drove the snakes out of Ireland, isn't that reason to celebrate? Certainly. But it's a celebration of reverence and thanks, not carrying on and carousing and speaking in that phony Irish brogue. The brogue is not phony. I made it up myself. You don't seem to understand. You don't seem to understand that by March 17th, we're all on the edge of lunacy. After being coped up so long in the miserable winter, don't you see? St. Paddy's Day, St. Patrick's Day, St. Patrick's Day happens to be falling at a time when we're celebrating the coming of spring, which is why we talk this way. But the occasion is past. There's no reason to talk that way now. Well, you can't help it. Once you start talking this way, there's no way to stop it. Well, if you weren't such a fool, you wouldn't start talking that way in the first place. Making a fool of yourself is what you're doing. Going around saying the God and the Gables when there's not a drop of Irish blood in you. You're in, you come back to the good Irish in the country. Carrying on and carousing like that. He wouldn't go around as a Irishman when he would want to look in the eye. Don't talk to me that way. I'll talk to you any way I want.
Okay, knock it off. Well, each has a point. The only way it'll ever be settled is to yell at each other. We'll be right back.
Making a fool of yourself is what you're doing. Going around saying the God and the Gables when there's not a drop of Irish blood in you. You're in, you come back to the good Irish in the country. Carrying on and carousing like that. He wouldn't go around as an Irishman when he would want to look in the eye.
Years of growing corn have taught us the right way to farm is the responsible way. We live out here, so we're concerned about the products we use. That's why we choose Lorsban 15G. It stops rootworm, and we're comfortable using the easy open bag with the built-in handle and pour spout.
Choose the most widely used corn soil insecticide.
Take care.
Lorsban 15G.
The right choice for all the right reasons.
An important part of NSP's job is maintaining our power lines. But by dramatically reducing pollution over the past 20 years, and by supporting tougher federal clean air standards, NSP is also helping to maintain these lines.
Okay, you already there in Wapaka, Wisconsin? All right, cue the hockey moms.
Let's go Blue! Let's go Blue!
It's called the Mother's Day Massacre.
We have about 30 hockey moms which are participating.
It's a fundraiser for the youth hockey organization, and we hope to make enough money to help offset the expenses of some equipment replacement.
Action was furious right from the start. And built from there. But the goal was disallowed.
And it's insulting, too, that they think I'm a man.
But the penalty shot was missed. Acting not unlike the professionals, the game ended in a tie. Again, like the professionals. But the ladies raised nearly $500 for their kids, who, of course, are the real players. We end this program as it began, by marking the spring season now upon us. And indeed, it is a season to celebrate as the bald eagles begin to migrate back to the Mississippi River Valley. Photographer Dick Nordling captured the soaring spectacle on videotape for us. Oh, we'll be here at the same time next Sunday. Hope you will, too.
More on Sunday has been sponsored by NSP, the energy to make things better. Follow the bouncing balls to a new time slot. The Minnesota State Lottery Daily 3 and Go for 5 have moved to 6:50 p.m. Now watch exclusive drawings every night at a new time. Live lottery drawings are only on WCCO Television, Channel 4. Want to increase your wealth by 7 figures? Call the WCCO Television Dane Bosworth Investment Connection for free advice about your money.
Wall Street Journal will not be seen this morning. Stay tuned now for Wealth Without Risk.
Dear Mr. Givens, here I was, 45 years old, and drowning in a sea of debt with 2 kids in college, more credit cards than money, and nothing put away for retirement. It seems impossible to believe that only 3 months after joining the Charles J. Givens organization, and after applying only a few of the strategies, I was able to turn my financial life around. Regardless what the future brings me,